Chapter 9. Process and History. The revolt against the sovereign decree of the triune God is waged in the name of rescuing the validity of history from the predetermination of an eternal council. Inevitably, however, this attempt to give meaning to time from within time leads to the radical contempt of time and history. The Hellenic faith in process led to the Stoic resignation from history, and the Renaissance and Enlightenment, in giving priority to time over eternity, led to the existentialist terror of time. Time, when deified, turns out to be not divine, but demonic. It would be easy, of course, to document this by citing existentialist and neo-orthodox thinkers. For Karl Barth, for example, God is divorced from omnipotence and given the radical, quote-unquote, freedom of process. He can tomorrow be the reverse of himself, can be demonic or whatever he will, as an aspect of his quote-unquote freedom. Thus, no eternal decree is conceivable, and time is ostensibly rescued for man. But process and history are at the same time divorced from the realm of faith and meaning. Indeed, for faith to depend on history as revelatory of an eternal decree is to quote-unquote destroy faith and the true decree, which is in terms of man's own inner process. Thus Barth quote-unquote saves man not only from the God of Scripture and Calvin, but also from time itself, and delivers him into the chaos of his own dialectic as the ground of his new creation. This same surrender of time and history can be seen very clearly and more naively in Houston Smith as he comments on the bodily resurrection of Christ. He grants that, quote, the resurrection faith did not deal with the fate of a good man. Its full reference was the character of God and the nature of ultimate reality, end quote. If it is, quote, the nature of ultimate reality, end quote, which is at issue, we would then assume that the bodily resurrection must be insisted on, for otherwise we have no evidence of that reality being victorious over death. But Smith assures us that the bodily resurrection is not a necessity. Quote, most Christians today continue to believe in the bodily resurrection of Christ, but even of those who do not, most claim to share in the resurrection faith. For if the ultimate referent of this faith is not what happened to a particular human frame, but rather the status of God, his absolute lordship over both nature and history, quote-unquote modernist Christians claim to be in full accord with the original Christians on this central point in question. But to insist that despite the scantiness of our evidence, there is only one legitimate view as to what happened in nature and history that first Easter is to focus the resurrection faith on physical externals instead of the central point, end quote. Thus, an insistence on the bodily resurrection as essential is to misquote the central point, end quote. But what is this, quote, central point, end quote? Smith has stated that it is, quote, the status of God, his absolute lordship over both nature and history, end quote. Yet what, quote, happened in nature and history that first Easter, end quote, cannot be identified with the bodily resurrection, that is, with the historical and natural facts of the case. It is clear, therefore, that Smith, in common with neo-orthodoxy, has rejected the usual definition of God, nature, and history. His quote-unquote God does not have to reveal himself in nature and history to be real. His nature is distant from this cosmos, and his history is independent of time and historical process. Indeed, after Kant, we must seek Smith's God, nature, history, time, and eternity, in the determinative mind of autonomous man. This divorce from the God of Scripture, the ontological trinity, is also a divorce from nature, time, and history. The overthrow of the eternal decree leaves man with a temporal decree that is anti-historical and is reduced to dependence on the process of each particular mind, which leads to the total anarchy of these multiple absolutes. A philosophy of biological process is therefore also a metaphysics which destroys historical process in favor of existentialist and dialectical processes. The mind of man expressing itself in terms of, quote, faith, end quote, becomes either the ground or else the manifestation of revelation and is thus the voice and control of revelation. When the historicity of the first Adam is undercut, then the historicity of Christ and the validity of all history is also destroyed. Biological process, as being in becoming, cannot tolerate the interference in time of God, the absolute and uncreated being, nor can the new absolute in process of becoming, the autonomous mind of man, allow any reality in history, any, quote, physical externals, end quote, to challenge its own autonomy or the priority of its becoming, which is the truly, quote, central point, end quote. Thus, modernists who began the century busily creating and fashioning their own, quote, historical Jesus, end quote, that is, a Jesus completely divorced from the eternal decree and made fully a child of process, soon turned their backs on their own idol, this, quote, historical Jesus, end quote, in favor of, quote, the Jesus of faith, end quote, in whom the divorce from eternity was followed by a divorce from time. In philosophy, the dignity of, quote, clock time, end quote, has been supplanted by a new kind of time, quote, time lived, end quote, which, simultaneous with its exaltation, has become the focal point of man's sickness. In spite of this disease of time lived, man perversely sees his evil as epitomized in time by the clock. As Levi points out with reference to Gabriel Marcel's The Philosophy of Existence, quote, the timetable, the schedule, and the clock are here the symbols of man's alienation from an intrinsically human world, end quote. From the biblical perspective, the triumph of man under God involves the conquest of time and history, its redemption in terms of covenantal purpose by timetable, schedule, and clock, among many other things. Man, seen in the perspective of, quote, God's eternal decree, end quote, is, according to Chapter 3 of the Westminster Confession of Faith, free when predetermined. The predestination of, quote, whatsoever comes to pass, end quote, by God is the very ground of man's liberty, for, quote, the liberty or contingency of second causes, end quote, is not, quote, taken away, but rather established, end quote, by the eternal decree. This concept undergirded the exuberant conquest of time and nature by Western man as scientist. The world of the clock, timetable, and schedule was seen as the liberation of man in terms of his purpose of mastery of time and nature. But as scientific man moved steadily away from his Christian origin and perspective into a philosophy of process, he perversely saw the timetable, clock, and schedule as, first, a means of dehumanizing man, as against God's insistence that man is primarily covenant man, and second, as a tyrant to be rebelled against in the name of freedom. Thus, at the moment of science's triumph, science began to be viewed as demonic by its very own sons, who sought vain refuge from the clock of history in, quote, time lived, end quote. Levi has cited, quote, the narcissistic subjectivity of all philosophy since the Renaissance, that whether it begins at the beginning, the middle, or the end, it always takes as its point of departure the epistemic properties of the human self, end quote. In literature, the keynote of Proust's thinking is, quote, everything mysteriously pointing to the experiences of a self lost somewhere in the labyrinth of time, end quote. Time, which was to have been autonomous man's defense against eternity, has become a juggernaut relentlessly destroying man's lonely self. And no wonder. Time being subordinate to the sovereign decree of God in eternity, it can only serve him who created it and can only have meaning in terms of his eternal counsel. There is another aspect to the flight from time and the contempt of history. According to, quote, the interpretive results of the newer physics, the concept of time with its order of before and after derives from the notion of causality, There is no absolute simultaneity because the speed of light is finite. That is, causal transmission requires time, end quote. Man, being in rebellion against law and causality as infringements on his becoming and on his ultimacy and process, must therefore be also in rebellion against clock time as the epitome of his slavery. Clock time is a bondage whose ticking always and monotonously moves in terms of an eternal decree external to and transcending man. Man's rebellion against eternity must therefore be followed by a rebellion against time. Time always beats to and echoes the stroke of eternity. When Augustine broke away from, quote, the Greek idea of time, end quote, he paved the way, quote, for an authentic ground motive, end quote. Even this small hint of the implications of time has been sufficient to haunt Western man with the spectre of eternity. Time refuses to have reference to itself alone, and it is manifestly impossible for the mind of man to comprehend and control it by his own decree. Quote, the modal diversity of meaning exists only in the coherence of all modal aspects, but it is the expression of a totality of signification which, through the medium of time, is broken up into modal diversity of aspects. The totality or fullness of meaning is the necessary transcendent center where, in their mutual coherence, all modal aspects converge into the unity of direction towards the origin, towards the arche of all meaning. End quote. Thus, the rejection of God inevitably requires as its logical concomitant the rejection of time. Man seeks either to arrest time by his own decree, as from the days of the Tower of Babel to Hitler's, quote, 1,000-year, end quote, Reich and the United Nations, or to flee from time by the clock, from history into mysticism, time lived. In either case, man as God is saying, quote, time shall be no more, end quote. Man is thus a temporal creature in rebellion against time and hence against his own being. Because he sees his problem as not ethical but metaphysical, time is, in terms of his philosophy of process, a disease in man to be overcome. Man's becoming is thus a process of overcoming the limitations of death, time, and history. It is no wonder, then, that the historical and bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ is an offence to modern man. After all, his own temporal and bodily existence is increasingly also an offence to him because he refuses to be a creature and strives in his heart, quote, to be as God, end quote.